Welcome, Simon. It's great to have you back with us. How have you been?
Look, Sunil, great to be back. It's always a winner, actually, as we might say in New Zealand, that you're actually invited back to something. So no, it's really good. No, really good down here. New Zealand is moving into springtime, so it's warmer, sunnier. We're generally happier, not politically. I'm sure we'll touch on some of that. Being in opposition here, His Majesty's loyal opposition, I might add. But no, things are great. Things are great, and been watching the UK with great interest over recent weeks.
And that's a good place to start in terms of His Majesty's country here. What's the reaction been like first to the Queen passing away, and then we'll go into monarchy? What was the sort of reaction in New Zealand like on that?
Yeah. Oh, look, a massive outpouring of grief and respect for Her Majesty. I think, dare I say, Boris Johnson probably summed it up quite well, actually, when he spoke in your parliament, saying that sort of this unexpected emotional reaction, which a lot of people had, and almost to a man and woman here, words of respect for the great service that she had given, in our case, as the Queen of New Zealand, but across the Commonwealth, and just a lot of emotion, a lot of respect for her. And I think it would also be fair to say that just about every Kiwi, Republican or otherwise, was glued to the screen. I was struck the number of people as I was traveling about at the BBC's live coverage of her Lion and State in Westminster, people just watching. I just thought it was remarkable. So yeah, quite an impactful moment here in New Zealand.
That's amazing. But before we talk about sort of the monarchy in general in here and New Zealand and people's thoughts on it, what's your sort of opinion on it? Are you? I think I know the answer to this, but maybe to our sort of listeners, what's been your stance on the monarchy in general?
So I describe myself as a staunch constitutional monarchist. So I firmly believe that the constitutional monarchy as a democratic political system is the best we have. And by good fortune, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, and 14 other realms get to share it. And look, the data speaks for itself. We are the most stable countries in the world. And I think a big part of it is because it's constitutional monarchy. I'm not as much a royalist, and by that I mean I've got absolute respect, obviously, for Her late Majesty, a lot of time for now King Charles and many of the royal family, but I'm not one of these fanboys. If you were to come to my home, and of course you're very welcome, but you're not going to find, teacups and cozies and teaspoons. I'm not so worried about the personalities as accepting just how amazing the constitutional structure is. Oh, and I better declare to your listeners, I used to head up what's called Monarchy New Zealand. It's the foremost constitutional lobby group here in New Zealand, although I've stepped back from that since being elected to Parliament.
Oh, amazing. That's something new there. Okay, interesting. So you're obviously pro-monarchy in terms of constitution. That's a really good point that you've made. I think some people almost miss that. And I think Australia is a good example when they held the referendum. I think a lot of data and a lot of analysis shows one of the reasons that they, in the end, ultimately kept with the monarchy and the Queen as head of state at the time was because of they just couldn't agree on a proper alternative. Even the people who were sort of anti-royalists and didn't want that sort of thing, I think one of the key reasons was they couldn't agree to an alternative to constitutional monarchy. So it's interesting that you say that. Do you think that's a view shared by other New Zealanders?
Look, the majority of New Zealanders are in support of King Charles and of the monarchy continuing in New Zealand, and Her Majesty's passing, the way it's being handled. I think, again, the engagement that New Zealanders had has actually strengthened that even further. And I think a small part of it, actually, Sunil, is even without articulating it, New Zealanders, like within the other realms, in fact, throughout the world, saw a peaceful, swift, easy transfer of power. The Queen is dead, long live the King. Just like that, it was done. And, contrast that to any republic, either, massive amounts of money and fights and controversy and recounts. Not in our countries. The monarchy is permanent. The crown is always there. And as I say, I think a lot of New Zealanders just saw a very peaceful, just, easy transfer of power and went, yeah, That's good. It's the way we like things. And as I say, the majority of Kiwis are in support of a monarchy. And a big part of that probably is a little bit like when you talked about Australia. They go, well, what's the alternative? So we have a few Republican voices here, few but loud. And one of the best things you can always say to them is, well, what model of republic? Because all they want is a blank check. Just give us the power. Just hand over Her Majesty or His Majesty's power to us, and we'll sort it out from there. But you go, oh, no. How are we electing our president? Does Parliament elect it? Do the people elect it? Does some panel elect it? How much are they paid? What do they do? What are their powers? And I'll notice, like with the Aussies, there's no answer. As I said, they just want a blank check so they can take control of, effectively the highest role in our land.
Talking sort of about the transition from Queen to King, and generally the funeral and all that's happened over that sort of period, do you think it portrayed the UK in better light? Because that's one of the things that we've been hearing from people saying that this has really been almost a good mark for the UK. There's obviously we've had Brexit, we've had current issues going on, and it was almost perceived here that we felt like we did a good representation to the world. Is that something shared in New Zealand?
Oh, look, most definitely. Although I think a lot of Kiwis, look, you did all the hard work. I mean, we sent a company of our military over and involvement there, which was great, our Prime Minister and Governor General and others. So, but you guys did all the heavy lifting. But I suppose, first and foremost, yes, you did a great job. I think it was, not to belittle what was an important moment, but it was great advertising to the world. And no one does pomp and ceremony, or to quote Algar, pomp and circumstance, quite like the Brits, and just beautifully done. But there's that slight nuance in that New Zealanders felt part of it too. As I say, we didn't do the heavy lifting, but we felt part of it. She was our queen. We're very familiar with the UK, certainly London. And I think a lot of Kiwis, almost with a nostalgia, not only Her Majesty, but seeing Westminster, seeing Parliament Square, the Mall, and all this, to go, yeah, we know these places, and we felt part of it. So again, you guys did great. You did all the heavy lifting, the pomp, the circumstance, just the precision. I mean, just it was a wonderful spectacle, but one with great depth and meaning. And I think it's why so many Kiwis were quite affected by the whole thing.
That's amazing to hear, and rightly so. New Zealand, Australia, and all the other Commonwealth nations are just as much. She was just as much as their queen as ours. So I think it's amazing to see. So you don't see a republic referendum happening anytime soon. We saw Jacinda Ardern. She alluded to that. She said something, I think, similar of the lines of, she thinks one day New Zealand will become a republic, but not anytime soon. Was that something that you would probably maybe rarely agree with Jacinda Ardern on?
Look, I actually no, not look. I know where she's coming from, and with no disrespect to the Prime Minister, she's the typical example of what I just touched on earlier. A Republican who says, "Oh, yeah, we'll have one. We need one at some point." She's got no idea what the model of it looks like. But I also don't agree with the inevitability. I think each generation of New Zealanders who come through, who just take a few seconds to reflect on our constitutional structure, go, hold on a moment, this is something to treasure and hold on to. So there's initial flirtations, but once people realize just how well and democratic constitutional monarchy is, they will keep retaining it. And so, I mean, I'm not old, but I've been around long enough from, a kid being told it's inevitable. It's inevitable. Well, I don't think it is. It's a great structure, and I think it's one of the key underpinnings of our democracies. And maybe put it really this way: we don't need more politicians in New Zealand, and that's what you get in a republic. Not someone like His or Her Majesty, another politician with either red or blue, left or right, and New Zealanders don't want that.
It's so good to hear you talk about sort of the constitutional side. It's something that largely is not really discussed a lot here. The fear that a lot of people have mentioned here is that some people who are maybe anti-monarchist, anti just generally royal family, one of the things is the Queen was such a likable character and people love the Queen so much, they almost put those feelings aside. And now that there's a new king, all of a sudden the same feelings that they had towards the queen is not the same for the king. So there's like kind of fear of what's going to happen next. But the good news on our side has been that polling, all that sort of stuff, has shown that, just as you said, that just the way the funeral was handled, anything that's happened, that kind of stuff hasn't come into fruition. So it's looking fairly safe, it seems, in this country for now. But we'll have to sort of see how things move along. Going on how
down here, I mean, don't get me wrong, look, Charles gets a lot of bad press at times, but I think a lot of Kiwis distinguish between the structure or the office and the person. And I think most New Zealanders get it, that it's bigger than whoever the office holder is at the time. And with no disrespect to Elizabeth II, her role as monarch was bigger than even her. But there's also, for a lot of Kiwis, an understanding for all Charles's peculiarities. He's been well ahead of his time on a number of issues. And a big thing for New Zealanders is the environment. And yep, 20, 30 years ago, he was seen as a bit of a crank. But now everyone goes, my God, he was right. So there's actually quite a lot of respect for him down here, including the way, when he's visited, the way he engages New Zealanders and that. So actually enormous amount of respect. And finally, the way he handled her passing. I think you saw a man grieving the loss of his mother. And yeah, so immense respect for him. I mean, God, imagine being under that pressure, trying to say goodbye to a loved one with the whole world watching you. God, help us.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think they, it'd be very interesting to see what time they've actually spent, all of them, in terms of mourning and processing this death. And that's a really good point, because I saw a anti-monarchist who made a really good comment, actually, which was, at the end of the day, this is someone's mother, grandmother, great grandmother that's passed away. Let's save any anti-monarchy or anti thing. So let's save that for another time period. This is not the time. Just, you have to remember somebody. And I think people generally shared that sentiment, it seems, across the Commonwealth in general, which I think was really good to see. And my most surprised country in this was probably Australia, because I know their current PM has been quite a pro-monarchist, and I saw that he did 15 days of no parliament, and in the end seemed to say amazing things about the Queen and monarchy, which I was quite surprised about. But it was, again, great to see from afar over here.
Well, not as big as you guys, partly because we're a small country, but as I say, almost wall-to-wall coverage on our TV channels, which are generally quite, I would say, left-leaning and Republican.
Right.
On Proclamation Day, literally thousands of New Zealanders turned out to witness the proclamation of Charles as King of New Zealand. We've just had our state memorial. The cathedral was packed, and again, thousands watching on TV. The Parliament lawns filled with people watching on a screen that was put up. The gun salutes have had, again, hundreds, if not thousands of people. There's been a huge engagement, and the Republicans here were, to be fair, respectful during Her Majesty's Line in State and funeral. They tried almost minutes after it concluded to start the conversation, and pretty much every Kiwi went, bugger off, which is great.
Talking of sort of Kiwis and what's going on in New Zealand, how's it been at the moment? In the UK, I would say Jacinda Ardern has not been receiving criticism. I wouldn't go that far, but there has been reports on her struggling, her popularity waning, and potentially losing the next election. Now, we've discussed in the past some of the reasons for that, some of the reasons for why yourself and your party believe that she is, shouldn't be the next prime minister, and the things that you guys have to offer. What are some of those things currently, and why is her popularity seemingly starting to go downhill?
Yeah, look, so objectively, particularly for your listeners, it is going downhill from the high of 50+% in the polls while COVID was raging. She's now at 34%, or rather her party, the Labour Party, and the party I'm part of is around about 37%. So her popularity, the Labour Party's popularity has certainly dropped, to be fair. when we bring in the ancillary or support parties, it's almost neck and neck between the centre left and the centre right. So it's still quite, as one journalist here has put it, a drag race. The fact that both our parties on the left and right are in the 30s means there's more work to be done. Traditionally, you need to get into the 40s to be, if you will, certain of a victory. But my political party, if I was to speak from the opposition, is in a much better position than we have been for a while. But for her, it's ultimately probably twofold in a broad way. One is COVID's being done with. I mean, look, COVID's still around, but all the management of it is finally finished. We don't have to wear masks, and a lot of the vaccine mandates are gone. We can travel again. So if you will, the fear, the control that she was able to, in some ways, benefit off, that's well and truly faded for Kiwis. So 18 months ago, she was seen to have saved the nation. But within the last year, people have got very, very sick of, I said, the mandates, the rules, the masks, the endless briefings. And I would suggest to you, Sunil, the fear. And speaking more with an academic hat on, fear can lead you so far, but then people get tired of it. And so they got sick of it. And the other is domestically, inflation is high. Our cost of living is going through the roof, certainly for New Zealanders. Petrol's, everything's expensive. Employers can't find employees. If you were here visiting, and of course you are very welcome, you would walk down this waterfront. I've got one of the best waterfronts in my electorate, where all the cafes and restaurants, half of them will be closed tonight, and it's Friday night. Why? They don't have staff.
Wow.
So that's just some examples. You know, our housing crisis, there's tens of thousands of New Zealanders who are on our homelessness waiting list to try to get what we call a state or a government house. Child poverty is worse than it's ever been. Our education standards are failing. 46% of students don't turn up to school. So wow. Crime is out of control. Gun crime we don't generally have here, but now we do. So there's just all these domestic problems, and she's not been seen to have any solutions, or very few solutions.
Well, I found fascinating. A lot of things you said there. I remember you mentioning about some of these sort of warning signs when we were talking probably 2 years ago now, where I knew violence was a massive issue in New Zealand, which I was very surprised about, and doing some research afterwards. I never would have presumed or imagined that New Zealand would have such high crime rates in certain parts. How has that happened under her leadership? Do you think is it police cuts? Is it her offering a softer stance? What has led to the sort of the increase in crime in New Zealand?
Look, there's no one or simple answer. A lot of crime at the moment, we call them ram raids, you might call them smash and grabs, a disengaged youth. That's probably coming out of COVID lockdowns. A lot of these young ones are already in dysfunctional families, and they got locked in with them for almost 2 years. And so the kids are disengaged from school. There's the likes of TikTok and so forth, which is it's become a big part of notoriety. I've noticed watching the security videos, a lot of my businesses that have been affected, that the kids are spending as much time recording themselves as stealing anything. We've seen a rise in the gangs. So we have a number of, like motorcycle gangs. Right. I would suggest, as would others, that the government's just hasn't addressed them. In fact, government ministers have been meeting or had met with gang leaders. They gave them millions of dollars for supposed drug rehabilitation projects, which were really just a fraud. So you've had a government that's been, to use the old cliche, soft on crime. Our police resources are stretched. There's so many mental health issues and domestic violence issues that when our police start their duties, multiple cars and officers are diverted to help there, rightly, but then you don't have as many cops on the beat. So there's just all of that swirling around, and then finally there aren't real serious consequences. We have a government that's actually deliberately trying to reduce our prison population. And as part of that, there's encouragements, for want of a better word, to not send people to prison. So we've got lots of them with these, we call them bracelets, electronic bracelets, where they get monitored, but they're still out in the community. And if they want to cause harm, they can. So multifaceted, no one solution, but a government that's basically just gone soft and isn't isn't putting in the necessary resources to both help those who are criminal or to have the just punishments needed.
What's a big sort of thing here is that Jacinda Ardern, the person's generally very popular here. Still, I think still majority of people, if you spoke to her in Britain, I think would largely say positive things about her. I don't think there'd be too many say negative things.
You can have her.
Yeah, you know, it's that's generally the perception here. I think you'll find it hard to find someone who would be really critical of it. I think people who like myself speak to yourself and other New Zealanders, I get a much more rounded view of what's going on and much more rounded some of the issues that New Zealand faces. In general, New Zealand, is it? Would you say her popularity is still fairly strong? We can see that obviously the Labour Party, her party, is declining. What about her as an individual? Because there is that sort of argument that sometimes maybe it's similar to Obama in America and other people, because as such they attract so many different types of people. Maybe people are disillusioned with the party, but they like the person. They'll end up voting for Jacinda as opposed to Labour. Is that a concern coming up in the future for elections in New Zealand?
Yeah, look, it definitely is. Look, she's a remarkable person. I've got a lot of respect for her as a person and as a leader. I just don't agree with most of her political policies, but there's respect for her there. I would say on the positive side, the way she presents New Zealand to the world is a good thing. But a lot of the world, if you will, don't see how she's operating here. So it's easy when a world leader turns up in the UK or the EU or just recently at the UN and gives a lovely speech as a new face, and that's very attractive. But if people were living here and seeing what she's doing and the various government policies, many are quite divisive, Sunil, very divisive. So it doesn't matter if it's Māori, Pākehā, old, young, vaccinated, unvaccinated, employer, employee, tenant, landlord. She's part of a government that is divided people. But to answer your primary question, she still remains relatively popular. She's still the most popular politician in New Zealand. It's hard to give you, out of 100, she used to have a 34%. I think she's at 34% popularity now. She used to be up at 60%. Oh, so wow. It is dropping. But again, to be fair, she's still the most popular by a country mile. And for a lot of people, particularly the younger ones, they see her as a young woman with a beautiful young daughter called Neve. And, she's broken the glass ceiling. And she says lovely things. Very empathetic words and kind. But equally, and you were hinting at it, she and her advisors have done very well of insulating her from some of the more unpopular decisions. So if something's going wrong, it's not her fault, it's her colleagues in her party who are letting her down. So right. It's been quite a clever, it's been done by politicians in the past. It's not new, but it's quite a clever way of managing things.
So, when is the next New Zealand election coming up? Is that
not soon enough? No, okay. Next year. So I think, definitely is next year. The Prime Minister gets to decide that. Unlike the UK, there is not a set date, although it has to be before, I think, November next year. I don't know the exact date, but it has to be every 3 years.
Right.
And by tradition, more than convention, the Prime Minister, sort of late January, early February, announces the date. And that the suspicion at the moment, particularly as the polls are not going so well for Labour, that they will push that out as far as they can, right. To ensure they can, lots of room to manoeuvre, and of course to try and put through the rest of their political agenda as quickly as they can before arguably losing power. But I want to be clear to your listeners, there's no guarantee. It's a drag race between the left and the right at the moment.
What do you think some of the top issues that are going to be coming up into that election? I'm sure we'll cover this later point in much more detail. But if we talked about it today in late September now, what do you think some of the key issues are going to be coming up for this election?
Look, the biggest is the economy. that's the biggest by a country mile. New Zealanders are struggling. The cost of living is just getting higher and higher. Inflation is going higher and higher. It's the discussion that Kiwis have at the moment. But look, there's a chance over the next 9 to 12 months things could get better, but that's a biggie. Probably quickly followed actually by crime. New Zealanders don't feel as safe as they once did. I mean, I live in a very well-to-do area. My electorate's, I don't know my UK equivalents, but it's a very well-to-do area. But we've got crime. We've got ram raids. We've got people being attacked on the street. We're having guns being discharged, people being shot. It's like this has not happened here before, sort of stuff. So people are a bit worried around that. And then there's some issues around, it's the tension between, well, we talk about it as co-governance, that this current government wants to change our democratic structures, broadly speaking, away from one person, one vote to, if you're Māori, so from the indigenous population, you get more say. And it's hard for me to get all the particulars in, but a lot of rejigging around how votes are counted, and what they call co-governance arrangements. So we're debating at the moment in Parliament who controls the water. So at the moment it's held in trust by the Crown for everyone. Now there's discussion that 50% of control of water will be the indigenous population. And that's supported by some, but a lot of Kiwis go, well, hold on a moment, why does one group that represents about 13% of the country get 50% of the control? So there's real tensions there.
I always find the Maori situation, the indigenous of New Zealand, so fascinating, because in our country we've had it's not quite as it's not quite the same, but we had someone from the Labour Party who got her whip suspended a couple of days ago, and she basically made, and this is actually well done to Sir Keir Starmer. He acted very fastly, the leader of the Labour Party here acted very fast in doing this. She basically made comments about the current Chancellor who is black. She basically at her Labour Party conference said that he doesn't sound black, and he doesn't he doesn't fit the criteria of what a black man should be, and essentially she was it got leaked out and she got removed. But I find it fascinating in New Zealand how you have a sort of Maori amount that are represented in government. The question I sort of have on this is the argument we kind of make here, people like myself, is it can be patronizing on certain levels when you do stuff like that, when you decide a minority, whether it's Indian minority or African minority, whatever the minority is, when you start to make concessions and you start to do things to kind of I don't know, give things away, whether it's quotas, whether it's on anything. The argument I would make, and many other people would make, that's quite in some ways patronizing. Is that fair to say for some people in New Zealand, or is it just a completely different argument?
No, I think it's exactly the same argument, and it's a fraught one. In that, look, there are some who very much buy that argument that there's a particular way of being an ethnicity, or a particular sexuality, or a particular gender. There's only a way to be. And that's probably one of the first issues down here. We've just had our own little controversy this week where effectively one Māori MP in government accused an opposition Māori MP of being vanilla, not a real Maori, because the issue is not their, we'd call it their whakapapa or a genealogy. Right. It's that if you don't hold a set of particular political beliefs, that some, usually the academics and activists, and I would argue the left, subscribe that to be a certain type of, to be a good Maori, you have to basically buy into left-wing Marxist ideology. And if you don't, you're not really Maori. And you can apply that to various issues, again, gender, sexuality, you name it, that it's no longer about actually if you are that or not, if you will, biologically. It's do you subscribe to a set of political beliefs? And so in this case, a Maori woman who sits on the right of politics, who says one vote for all, in her case was arguing about the care of children, that we should just be putting love first, not actually the culture, was said, well, you're not proper Maori. Yeah, we know you are Maori biologically and genetically, but because you don't subscribe to these left-wing beliefs, you're not truly Maori. And again, that's happening right through the sector. If someone's, again, we have a lot of arguments here around gender and sexuality at the moment. If you're a more, let's say, conservative-leaning lesbian woman or gay man who doesn't subscribe to left-wing ideals, then you're not truly gay. It just spirals, and I hope I've articulated that succinctly, but it's a major problem here. And then in behind it, New Zealand's very multicultural, and there's piles of people who Maori, European, Chinese, Indian, Malay, African, South African, who go, we don't want to divide us. I don't identify myself by that. I just want to be a New Zealander and get on with my life. And they do find it patronizing. But the last point I'd make is there's a very vociferous move, particularly those on the left and through media, that anyone who questions the narrative, particularly around critical race theory, identity politics, is to be harassed, shamed. You're a bigot, you're a racist, you're intolerant. So you've got to be pretty brave to stand up and take the opprobrium.
That's so interesting, because I would say we suffer from something very similar here. The good thing is, I think for the first time, I've noticed a change maybe in the last few months. The fact that Sakir actually removed her whip was very surprising on my side. It's something that we have talked about a lot over here, about the sort of patronizing tone. What I think the worst example for us, who used to get it horribly, was probably Priti Patel for our party in the Conservative. The amount of abuse and racial stuff that she would get, and it's okay because she's technically not Indian anymore, because she's part of the Conservative Party, and she sits more on the right. So it's we'll be vicious and we'll be horrific to her, but that's okay, because she lost that kind of that Indian card when she went a bit anti illegal immigration. So it seems, so the good thing is, I think we're seeing a pushback. So we're seeing people actually, even on the left, which has really surprised me now, so I said, no, that's actually wrong. We probably shouldn't have done that. So there's seemingly, I'm hopeful that we're heading in the right direction, but it's interesting because we're suffering from very similar here.
The traditional left, to be fair here in New Zealand, are pushing back on this.
Okay.
Some of the best advocates are, again, traditional, older left-wingers. Don't get me wrong, the writers as well, but it's funny where you find your allies these days who, like the Priti Patel situations, are going, hold on, this is not right. You don't lose, if you will, your identity simply because of your political beliefs, but that's what is happening here a lot of the time. But it's often the traditional left that says, no, that's just not right. Yep, different philosophies, but you don't somehow become less of a Maori or an Indian or a Pacific Islander if you go and join the right wing. But it's sad. It's sad to see, but it is very present here. But I should add too, we still have a problem with a lot of abuse. Doesn't matter if it's left or right, of minorities at times, and for women. So a lot of our women politicians get attacked far more viscerally and nastily than men.
Oh wow, okay. I think that's probably,
and I'm sad to say, I mean, we all get abuse and death threats. I mean, it's sort of part and parcel. But a lot of my female colleagues, that the online stuff is pretty horrendous. And my colleagues who are Pacific Island or Maori, Korean, Chinese, they often attract a lot more of just, again, this vile nastiness. So I don't want to leave your colleagues with impressions listening that it's all roses down here except for sort of political manipulation. There is a sort of a nasty underbelly at times, but it's small, but it's vocal.
Interesting. I think for us, largely we've done fairly well on the sort of racial stuff in the sense of we had, and Boris Johnson, the most diverse cabinet in the UK's history, and it seems to be going down a sort of similar route with Liz, which is good to see. What I'm happy about, not so much as the diversity, is they're actually really qualified people in their roles. They're not just there for the sake of ticking a quota box, which I hope continues. But yeah, it's always fascinating understanding more about the sort of huge population of Maoris in indigenous people there, because obviously it's slightly different for us. We don't quite have that. So I think in some ways we're able to be a bit more, maybe brutal is a word, or the bit more maybe less empathetic in some cases, I think, with how we're about this. But it seems to be moving in a positive direction. Are there a lot of Maoris that support the National Party? Obviously, Simon Bridges, we well known Maori that was. In general, is there a massive movement of Maoris that support National Party?
No, I mean, look, there are some, and by some I don't mean 10. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands. So there's a goodly number, but traditionally and broadly speaking, a lot of Māori, particularly in the urban areas, will support the Labour Party. It's sort of an almost habitual tradition. Not to overly simplify New Zealand politics, but by and large, if the Māori vote goes where the Ratana Church, one of sort of hard to explain, but a Christian Māori spirituality blend of church, where it chooses to vote, a lot of Māori vote, and that's been traditionally Labour. Similarly, if you're a farmer, by and large, you're always voting National. I mean, no one's monitoring it, but there's sort of those stereotypes.
Yeah.
But yeah, traditionally, the Pacific Island community is fascinating. They tend to vote left and vote Labour. But why I say it's fascinating, they are deeply conservative, deeply conservative, which is completely out of whack with where Labour's at. Is exceptionally progressive and liberal. So it's just sort of habitual voting here in many ways. But those are just broad brushstrokes. As I say, you'll see quite a diverse range of voting, but it would also, again, to be fair to say that the majority of Māori will vote for the Labour Party.
I wonder why that is, because, for example, in the UK, we had a similar situation in sort of 70s and 80s, where there's lots of different communities that this applies to, but I'll use the Indian community. That was largely would vote left, would vote Labour. But if you look at them and you speak to, without generalizing every Indian, they're generally very conservative, both socially and economically. And it was always a bit of a bafflement that the Conservative Party could never tap into this rather significant portion of people in this country. And I'd say it's changed in the last 10, 15 years. The biggest group of people who, outside British white people, that voted Brexit, for example, were Indians. And by quite a significant margin. So there's definitely been a shift. More and more of them are voting Conservative. And I think the good thing that Cameron and Boris, the combination of those two in particular, they were able to attract a lot more of the Indian vote. Now, the cynics will say that's because, well, they've been in the country longer, they're earning more money, so they're obviously going to go for a party that's lower taxes. But I think there's also a highlight where they made a conscious effort to really engage with those communities and basically say, you have very conservative belief, you believe in low taxes, you're generally quite hardworking, business friendly, like you should be voting Conservative. And they it took them a while to really engage and really, I think Labour also took it for advantage that they presumed a lot of ethnic minorities would always vote for them, and that changes that. Do you think that could be a similar situation with Maoris and other sort of ethnic minorities in New Zealand?
Look, I think so over time. It's not completely static, and nor is it completely stereotypical. So, in my own electorate, I have quite a large proportion of Māori and Pacifica in one particular suburb, and actually I garner quite a high vote there, which is very nice of them. So, you can shift things, but yeah, I don't know. New Zealanders, look, there's nothing exceptional about New Zealand compared to any other country, but we are sort of creatures of habit.
Right.
And I think that sort of sustains a lot of behavior. I mean, one way to illustrate it is that the National Party, so the equivalent of your Conservative Party, has been very proactive around treaty settlements. So this is to do something called the Treaty of Waitangi, an agreement between the Maori chiefs and the Crown in 1840. And ever since then, there's been multiple breaches by the Crown. Think land stolen, all, I mean, just some terrible things. So over the last 20, 30 years, we've been going through quite a major settlement process with each tribe. And the National Party, the centre-right, has led that. We've done far more treaty settlements with far more iwi or tribes than the Labour government. And yet, to illustrate the point, more Māori will still vote for the Labour Party. So, you know, there's still more work to be done. And I would argue, Sunil, not even about the left and right. It's more, how do you sort of say to New Zealanders, break out of your habits. Just because you and your family have always voted this way doesn't mean you have to. You know, what is it that you want? What do you think is the best party for New Zealand?
I think there's lots of similarities there with the UK. I think it took us a really long time to get there. I think there were certain people who really broke that barrier. Your Priti Patels, even Rishi Sunak, these kind of profiles of people who really, I think, took a lot of flack, and now it's a lot more. I think the biggest concern, I think Priti Patel talks about it a lot, and so does Rishi Sunak to a certain extent, is when they were younger, saying that they were conservative. I think growing up in the 90s and 80s, it was a bit more of a taboo within that community to come out and say it. So they were a bit more afraid, if you like. I think in 2000s, it's probably not the case, but maybe it's similar for Maori. Sometimes it's, you know, they're maybe almost afraid to come out and say that, you know, I actually have a lot of conservative roots and I'm going to go out and vote National Party even. And maybe that could play a part. I'm not sure.
Oh, look, you'll certainly get that here. To use your term, it can be quite brave if you're from one group to go against the general trend. And it comes back to what we were saying earlier. You know, we've got this centre-right Māori woman for something called the ACT Party. So that's right of my part. It's even further to the right. Who, she's very much against the stereotype. And the Labour Party, the left, have absolutely tried to eviscerate her. Not only are her opinions wrong, but again, she's wrong. She's clearly the wrong ethnicity. She's sold out. She's vanilla, I think, was the term that the government minister used of her. And it just comes back to that earlier point we were discussing, that a lot of aspects of life now are being linked to political beliefs. And if you don't subscribe to those political beliefs, then you can't lay claim to certain titles, be it your ethnicity, your gender, your sexuality, or whatever. And it's actually speaking philosophically, a very dangerous place to be in what should be a pluralistic, multicultural society.
I think you just need to. I'll be interested to see what her response was, because I think you've just got to almost call out. This is where I think sometimes we were a bit weaker here in the Conservative Party when this was happening for the last longer than 5, 10, 15 years. We really didn't call it out, or we didn't make a massive deal out of it. This is one of the topics I actually ended up doing a talk at Oxford University on, which was, you know, it was quite brutal about it, but I was very just, if a fellow Indian tells me I should think a certain way, I would say, you know, you're almost mentally enslaved. You can't tell me how I should think. And if it's a non-Indian says it to me, then I think it's outright racism, right? You can't say, I can't say to Simon O'Connor, you are white, so you should think this way. That's outright, in my opinion, being racist. And if a fellow white person says that to you, then that's just you're almost mentally enslaving your mind into thinking this is the only way you can think. And I think that sounds similar to what this person received. So I'd be interested to see her response and what, if her party did anything about it or did much about it.
To be fair, they have. So her name's Karen Chor, and she's actually written a really good piece in one of our major papers, and kudos to the paper that it's actually published it. It doesn't often happen. No, her party's actually really pushed back. I think a lot of Kiwis are going, yeah, that was out of line. And I think actually, to be fair, the minister responsible apologised.
Okay.
The Prime Minister said it was right that he did. He completely overstretched, but the mindset very much remains. And again, if you, as a woman or as someone of a different ethnicity, do not toe a very particular view politically, you are often derided, or so you're captured, you're enslaved, you're brainwashed. It's very, I often use the term, it's very monological over here at times. There's only one way to think on issues. And if you think in a certain way, usually the left or progressive way, that's okay. If you're someone like me who often doesn't, who's generally quite conservative, then, oh, you're just wrong. Not only your idea, but you're wrong. You're a bad person, and therefore it's quite normal to be abused, threatened. But yeah, the solution is pretty simple. Really, most of us just have to stand up, a bit of a backbone. And I just encourage certainly Kiwis, and to the extent I can, and to the United Kingdom, is just more conversations. As you say, call people out or explain why you think what you do. And I still think there's a good place for conversation and reason.
Agreed. I think that's a good way to end it on. It's been great to have you on. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. But yeah, thank you for your time today.
So no, it's an absolute pleasure to join you and your listeners.
Thank you.